welcome to Ancient Secrets. Like a podcast, it's a Zoomcast, where you get the opportunity to meet God's actual cast. I'm Rabbi Flip of Congregation Micah in Nashville, Tennessee, here to introduce you to the theological heroes of our past, so that we might glean some practical wisdom for the present. After each interview, we will reveal our guests' true identity, and they will reveal a bit about their own theology, as well as the missions of the organizations they've dedicated their lives to serving. So put on your imagination caps and get ready for some practical advice for this pandemic. We have with us today a truly remarkable individual, someone who survived a pandemic in the first century of the Common Era, a Talmudist, an interpreter of text, and a true theologian, one of the greatest rabbinic sages of, if not all time, at least his time. A Sabra, born in the land of Israel around the year 50 of the Common Era in the city of Lod, near what is now Tel Aviv. We welcome to the program a man whose name is a variant of Yaakov and means to protect and shelter. What a perfect pandemic name. Please welcome Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef.
I've got to admit, it's getting better. It's getting better all the time. I have to admit, it's getting better. It's getting better all the time.
Rabbi Akiva, thank you so much for joining us today. Having helped the Jewish people survive difficult challenges before, well, you just seem the perfect guest to invite to the program in these tricky times of social distancing. How are you holding up?
Rabbi Flip, thank you for having me. Such a creative thing you are doing here, exposing our people to the wisdom of our sages, and at the same time educating them about the infrastructure of the Jewish community here locally. I'm doing well. Frankly, it's programs like these that are helping me get through all of this. That and faith.
Thanks. Well, Rabbi Akiva, what kernels of wisdom might you share that listeners would find helpful during this pandemic?
Unfortunately, as you mentioned, this is not my first encounter with a plague. We didn't know about the power of social distancing back then, and 24,000 of my students were killed during the first century. Like the number 6 million, it takes 1 second to say, but each one represents a life. And my students, they were the entirety of Jewish religious scholarship of that generation. It was devastating.
So sorry. What did you do?
I did what I had to do. What could I do? I started over with just 5 students, all of whom risked their lives to receive rabbinic ordination in the time of the cruel Roman persecution. Jews today still observe several weeks of mourning during this time of year between Passover and Shavuot to recall the tragic loss of that generation of future Jewish leaders.
And what insights from that experience might you bring to this one?
Rabbi Flip, back when we were free to move about, I was traveling in a foreign city, a popular destination, though I won't say where. Like a good Jew, I follow the rules of the land in which I live, and I'm told whatever happens in this particular city stays there. Anyway, I didn't have any reservations, and when I arrived, all the local lodgings were full. So I thought to myself, whatever the merciful one does is for the best. And I went and stayed in a nearby campground. Now I had with me a rooster, a donkey, and a lamp. These are typical ancient Near Eastern travel possessions, sort of like how y'all travel with AirPods, neck pillows, and water bottles. Anyways, a wind came and blew out my lamp. A cat came and ate the rooster. A lion came and scared away the donkey. After suffering these losses, I again thought to myself, whatever the merciful one does is for the best. Wouldn't you know it? That very night, there was a tragedy in the city, and I could have been killed.
Your point?
My point is that sometimes things happen, and they seem not so good, but good things eventually come from them. We cannot always see the wisdom of the Holy One. The Talmud did give a reason for the past pandemic.
And what does it say?
It says that students were not treating each other with respect. So with my new students, I modeled what it means to disagree civilly, reverently. You Americans no longer trust the news, your leadership, or each other. If the Talmud is right, then one lesson to draw from this terrible affliction is that you must rebuild your national bonds between each other, with Israel, with the world. We are in this together, and our shared suffering is producing new empathy, a willingness to reach out to one another. Whatever the merciful one does is for the best.
Rabbi Akiva, the Talmud relates that a group of your contemporaries, sages like you, were once traveling to Jerusalem in the days after the destruction of the temple, and you were gazing, all of you, at the Temple Mount, desolate, destroyed. And you saw a disturbing sight, a fox emerging from the place where the Holy of Holies once stood, where the Spirit of God had once dwelled. And all the rabbis, your contemporaries, they started to weep, except you. You smiled. Why were you happy?
Oh, I remember that. Indeed, I was happy, because the great prophet Isaiah predicted the destruction of Jerusalem, and Zechariah foretold its rebuilding. We had witnessed the fulfillment of the first prophecy, so I felt certain that the second would also come to fruition. As hard as this time is, it's also the first time humanity has dared to stand up to a pandemic, refusing merely to accept death. As in the past, we prevailed, and we will rebuild.
One of the many things that makes you such a legend and a hero of mine and many others is that you lived during such a crucial era in the development of Judaism as we know it. Without you, we would be practicing a very different religion today.
I guess you could say so. Most of us rabbis knew, even at the time, that ultimately something would have to take the place of worship in the temple. Some folks still hoped and prayed that the temple might be rebuilt. There was even a group that took to military resistance under the great Bar Kokhba. For a while, I thought he might be our divine savior, but it was not something I could ultimately be a part of. My resistance became more of a moral response. It ended with me spending time in prison, and then, well, some called me a martyr.
Rabbi Akiva, you are credited with being the founder of Rabbinic Judaism, systematizing the Mishnah, the oral law, in such a way that it was just much easier to memorize and pass down. You are one of the most beloved heroes of Jewish history, and yet, legend has it that you only learned to read Hebrew and began studying Torah at the age of 40. How did you do it?
The truth is, my wife Rachel deserves a great deal of credit. Like a good spouse, she seemed determined to have me cultivate my brain. My intellectual development would have been impossible without her support. I came from humble beginnings, working as a shepherd. Then this one time I stood at the mouth of this well and see this hole in a rock. And I asked folks standing there, who do you think carved this rock? And one of them said, the water that constantly falls on it every day. And I immediately realized that just as the soft sculpts the hard, words of Torah, which are hard as iron, will all the more so carve my heart and mind, which is but flesh and blood. So I started the journey of studying Torah.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's a journey that led you to the rabbinate, and that's true in real life as well. It's almost time to reveal the rabbi behind the rabbi. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Ancient Secrets is brought to you by Congregation Micah, a vibrant synagogue serving all of Middle Tennessee, offering creative and diverse ways to celebrate Jewish life using the rich beliefs and practices of progressive Judaism as its foundation.
My colleague and friend, the spiritual leader of Congregation Sherith Israel and founder of JMS, Nashville's Jewish Middle School, Rabbi Saul Strasberg joins us. A native of Schenectady, Rabbi Strasberg holds a bachelor's degree from Yeshiva University, received his ordination from Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, has studied at Hebrew University, Yeshivat Ateret Kohanim in Jerusalem, is also an experienced musician, holds the National Synagogue's record for the longest Rosh Hashanah shofar blast. And I've heard him blow. Nationally, Rabbi Strasberg serves on the steering committee for the International Rabbinic Fellowship, is on the board of Yeshivat Maharat, and acts as an APAC rabbinic mentor. In town, Rabbi Strasberg is the director of Nashville's Kosher Commission, is coordinator for the National Eruv, and is married to Daniela Pressner, the principal at Akiva Day School. Together, they're the proud and grateful parents of Cole, Amelia, Ravital, and Yedid. Rabbi Saul, you are such a mensch. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what it is that makes you tick. Let's start here. What is it that makes you get out of bed in the morning, and what keeps you up at night?
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Flip, for putting this together. I think what gets me out of bed in the morning is a true love of the community, a true love of humanity. And like Rabbi Akiva said, the thought that we're living in such important times when we can each make a contribution to the world. I just feel like Judaism has such a strong message for our community, for our families, and for the larger community as well. And so I see community building and sharing our tradition as such a great way to dedicate my days and my lives.
Yeah. Well, would you tell us more, please, about your community at Sherith Israel and what it's like to live as an observant Jew here in Nashville, Tennessee?
Sure. I love speaking about our shul, our community, Sherith Israel. The synagogue has been around for, I think, 115 years. It was the historic synagogue for the immigrants from Hungary who moved to Nashville, finding a better life. Today's a very diverse community of Jews of all ages and all backgrounds committed to Jewish tradition. And we do operate like a family. We take care of each other, and we keep an eye on each other, and we grow together, and we study together. The setting is an Orthodox synagogue. The prayer service is basically the way it's been for decades and over a century. And people feel the warmth in tapping into the mitzvot and the holiday celebrations and the Torah study.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a very warm place. I love how often we partner. I appreciate the mikveh that you have and the life that you lead. It's a beautiful model. And I don't think we could have made the move to Nashville, Tennessee almost 15 years ago with our kids being young if there wasn't a more traditional community to be a part of also, and certainly not if there wasn't a Jewish day school. We rabbis are taught to raise up many disciples. And not unlike Rabbi Akiva, it's just sort of in our DNA to build schools and to teach Judaism. I love it like you do. It's why Rabbi Lori and I built the Micah Children's Academy. The Jewish Middle School, JMS, has been described by many as one of Nashville's best kept educational secrets. Can you tell us a little bit more about it so that it's not a secret anymore?
I would love to. And it's definitely an honor to be in your company. What you and Lori have done is really amazing. And I just feel very close to you as colleagues and as friends. I think the Jewish people understand and evaluate education in a much different way than other communities. And we prioritize learning, studying wisdom, and commitment to education in a different way than other communities throughout the world. And it turns out that the middle school years are the most important years of a child's life. Their brains are turning on, they're powering up in a huge way. And nationwide and worldwide, we are failing to help kids understand who they are, the civilization they're growing up in, what they're doing here, and empowering them to make a difference in the world. Particularly in Nashville, the schools, there's some really wonderful schools, there's great programs, but we find them very distracting. There's so many options to choose from, so many activities. Kids are being pressured to write their college resumes in 7th grade, and they're not allowing the kids to feel nurtured and grow academically and emotionally in a way that we feel is healthy and productive and creative. And so the Jewish Middle School, first and foremost, is a school, an independent school that gets the middle school spirit. It's called Jewish Middle School because we offer really incredible Jewish studies for Jewish children, but it's a school for families of all faiths and backgrounds who evaluate education in a way that we do, where education comes first, where creativity is cherished, and where kids are nurtured in a way that there's a calm classroom and they can grow together as good human beings.
I've always been so impressed by you and Daniela as well, and what you've brought to our youth in the community, mostly because you care about their souls, which is something that I think that the average school system or school is not always paying attention to, that those parts of them are growing as well. I know that both of you have pivoted so well in this pandemic area and offering these online offerings, which has been tremendously helpful to keep the learning going. And I'd say the two biggest praises I have about my kids being involved in your lives and your family's lives and in the community, at Akiva especially, was the love they developed for learning, which is just infectious, which applies to learning they do outside the Jewish world. And I felt like you and your wife Daniela were such a big part of teaching them what I call the mafteach hatarbut, right? The key to the culture, sort of the secret handshakes of Judaism, so that all three of my children can make Kiddush and they feel comfortable in a more traditional setting, even though we are, of course, of a more progressive mindset. And the relationships they've developed both with text and with other Jews and with learning and with Judaism itself was just such a beautiful thing. And I just want the whole world to know about it. So I thank you for sharing that a little bit with us.
I appreciate that. I think the best gift we can give a child, whether they're elementary school, middle school, or high school, is to make them feel comfortable in their skin, make them comfortable and proud of who they are. And that could be as an American, as a Protestant, and as a Jew. The greatest gift we can give a kid is to make them feel good about themselves. And that's what we seek to do in the Jewish middle school, particularly at the middle school level. During the pandemic, it's very, very important for us to continue our education, not just for the academic academic reasons. We want to keep touching the math and the science and the English and keep moving forward. It's important to touch and interact with each single kid every single day, to interact with them eye to eye, hear what they're thinking, challenge them if we can. We also have a process group that meets once a week with Jack Simon, which allows the kids to process what they're going through at a healthy basis. And we even have a middle school hangout room with Shelton Clark, who's one of the amazing educators who really understands middle school spirit and allows the kids to grow in a social, emotionally healthy way, and see this not as a downtime, but as a time in their lives when they can grow and they can even enjoy.
Well, we'll make sure that the viewers of our program will have all the contact information to get in touch with you and in touch with the school. And I wish you much luck with it.
Rabbi Flip, thank you so much.
Please, we are so happy. Congregation joins me in thanking you for your willingness to share more about who you are and why you do what you do and what you bring to the Jewish community, while also educating us about one of Judaism's greatest figures. We wish you much luck personally and professionally, and we hope that you go from strength to strength.
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks also to our viewers out there. We look forward to having you join us next time on Ancient Secrets, Congregation Micah's Zoomcast, where you can meet God's actual casts. Okay, the show is done now. There'll be
okay.
If you want to learn more about Rabbi Akiva, you can Google him or study with us, and more digital content will be available on our website, Facebook, and YouTube pages.
Zoom, zoom.